At 82, I fell for someone, and I was just as unprepared as I had been at 25. Maybe more, because at 25 I at least expected to be caught off guard. Nobody warned me that this was still possible. Nobody sat me down and said, "Elizabeth, be careful." Not because you're fragile, because you're still so very much alive. And alive, it turns out, means vulnerable. Always. No matter how many years you carry. I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying it because nobody said it to me. And I paid a price for not knowing. Not money. I mean mornings when I didn't understand why I should get out of bed. The feeling of living inside a life that had suddenly gone strange, like a house you've known for decades where someone moved all the furniture in the night. A pain you can't name because naming it would mean admitting it to yourself. That is the price nobody talks about, the one that comes after the beginning. The one that arrives precisely when you had allowed yourself to believe that this time, finally, it would be different. You clicked on this video. That wasn't accidental. Either something has already gone wrong, or you feel something shifting. You're not here out of idle curiosity. Stay. What comes next is the conversation almost no one is willing to have out loud. I'm 85 now. I was married to Harold for 58 years. I want you to sit with that number for a moment, because numbers like that mean nothing until you inhabit them. 58 years of his coffee cup on the left side of the sink, his reading glasses on the arm of the couch every single evening, same spot, as if they grew there. His voice calling my name from the other room to tell me something he'd read, something that made him think of me. All of that, every quiet, ordinary piece of it. And then one morning, none of it. Just the house. Just the sound of a life that had learned to breathe without its other half. 2 years passed. Anne and Susan called every Sunday. Michael drove down when he could, and each time he left, I stood in the doorway watching his car disappear and felt something I never told him. The house was in order. The garden was tended. I had my routines, my neighbor Dorothy on Thursdays, my books. I was, by every visible measure, managing. But managing is not the same as living. And somewhere in the long stretch of quiet Tuesdays and empty Saturdays, I had stopped noticing the difference. There is a picture many women paint for themselves at a certain age, beautiful, almost comforting. They say, "Now I truly know myself. The wounds of the past have been my education. If someone comes now, I will choose better, with my eyes fully open." I believed this about myself. I would have told you so with complete confidence. And then someone came, and the heart did not respond with wisdom. It responded with hunger. Because here is the most honest thing I know how to say. The years do not make you immune to longing. They make the longing deeper, quieter, more patient, and for that reason, more dangerous. Because you're ashamed of still feeling it, because you believe that at your age you should be settled into some serene acceptance. And so the longing goes underground, and when it finally surfaces, you don't always recognize it in time. Have you ever felt that? That hunger you didn't know you were carrying until something placed itself right beside it and made the shape of the absence visible. There is an idea that persists, that age is a kind of armor, that accumulated scars make us harder to wound. There's some truth in that, I won't deny it. But an old oak can still be bent by a storm. That isn't weakness. That is proof it is still alive. The moment you become truly invulnerable is the moment you have stopped growing. And I refuse to believe any of us is finished. Not at 70, not at 85. The day you stop being reachable is not wisdom. It is a kind of quiet ending. His name was Bernard, a widower 4 streets away, with a laugh that filled a room without crowding it, and the rare gift of listening as if what you said genuinely mattered, not nodding politely, actually present. Clara, the daughter of my neighbor Vivian, introduced us at a garden gathering in late September. I remember the quality of the light that afternoon. I remember thinking, without quite meaning to, I had forgotten that afternoons could feel like this. I was not looking for anything. I want to be honest about that. And yet when Bernard asked about the hydrangeas along my fence, and I found myself telling him their whole history, Harold's part and my part, and the years they had grown and changed together, I understood that I had in fact been waiting. I just hadn't known what for. The breakfast table alone. At first that had felt like freedom. Tea exactly how I liked it. No one needing anything before I'd had a moment to myself. But then it became habit. And then one ordinary Wednesday morning, with no particular reason for it, it became simply heavy. The chair on the other side, the empty one, the one that looked at me. Loneliness after 80 has a different weight than loneliness at 40. At 40 it feels temporary, like weather that will pass. At 80 it sometimes carries a question, whether this is now the shape that life takes. That question has no reassuring answer. And there is something else that goes unspoken, the body's silence. A body that has forgotten what it is to be touched with tenderness. Not desire exactly, but something more fundamental. The simple human knowledge that someone is aware you exist. A hand placed over yours for no reason. The warmth of another presence in a room that has been yours alone for too long. So when Bernard looked at me the way he did, when he asked about me rather than past me, the heart did not say, "Let me consider this carefully." The heart said, "Finally." That is not foolishness. That is profoundly human. But it is precisely the moment when the eyes need to be most open. And mostly, in my experience, they are not. What happened over the months that followed was not dramatic. No single turning point I could circle and say, "There, that is where it broke." What happened was gradual. The kind of thing that only becomes visible in retrospect, once you've traveled the road and climbed high enough to look back. I began adjusting, quietly, without announcing it to myself. I stopped expressing certain opinions because they created a particular atmosphere I didn't want to be responsible for. I rescheduled my Thursday walks with Dorothy to accommodate something Bernard preferred. I found myself reading his moods before I attended to my own. I softened things I had understood clearly, told myself I'd been mistaken about what I saw. I had done all of this before, a very long time ago, and I did not recognize it until it was already behind me. Does any of this sound familiar? There is something those who study the heart have understood for decades without it ever quite reaching ordinary life, that we each carry an internal map, not a conscious one, an old one, drawn early in the first years of learning how to love and be loved, added to by every relationship since. When someone new arrives, the heart follows that map without consulting the mind. It seeks the familiar, even when the familiar has caused pain, especially sometimes when it has. I believed I had thrown that map away. I had done the work, or what I thought was the work. 58 years with Harold had taught me what love looked like when it was steady, and still the map opened, as if it had been waiting all along. I want to ask you something directly. Think about what drew you to him in the beginning, those first weeks when everything felt possible. What did it unlock in you? The feeling of being known? Someone who asked about you rather than passed you? The way you felt like the only person in the room. Hold that, and then take one step back. Think of a relationship from your past that cost you something you didn't fully recover for a long time. Is there a thread connecting the two? Not in the personalities, maybe only in the feeling, in who you became when you were close to them. That is not an accusation. That is the most honest question I have ever asked myself. The relationship with Bernard ended. I won't tell you the details because they aren't the point. What I will tell you is how it felt, because that is the part most people skip over, the part that goes undescribed because it is the hardest to put into words. It wasn't only the loss of him, though that was real. What I mourned most was a version of myself that had existed inside that relationship. The woman who had started humming again while washing dishes. The woman who dressed in the morning with something that felt like pleasure. The woman who had a story at the end of the day that felt worth having. Not to tell anyone in particular, simply worth having. A life with a shape to it. An ongoing story with another person in it. That woman disappeared when it ended. And that second disappearing had its own particular weight. And then the empty chair again. The week resolving back into separate, unanchored days. The telephone returning to its former silence. The bed that hadn't changed but felt wider. These are not abstract sorrows. They live in the body. You feel them before you find words for them. There is no social form for this grief. No one sends flowers. No one gives you a week. People say, well, at least you tried. As if trying were already the consolation prize. As if courage at the beginning was meant to make the ending hurt less. They mean well, but it lands wrong. You carry it quietly, the way you have learned over the years to carry most things. And in the carrying, the cruelest conversation begins, the internal one. What did I do wrong? Have I ever truly been capable of holding on to someone? Is it too late to change anything that matters? Is this simply who I am? Hear me on this. Those questions are not the truth. They are the signal that a wound is open. They feel like searching, and they are actually circling. Closed rooms with no doors. You cannot answer your way out of them because they are not really questions. They are pain wearing the costume of logic. And as long as they go unnamed, they govern everything quietly from the inside. Like a slow leak you can't find that gradually empties the whole house. I want to ask you to do one thing right now. Think of one single moment from that relationship that was genuinely good. Not the end, not what broke. One small moment from before any of that. An ordinary afternoon when nothing was urgent. A laugh over something meaningless. A glance that counted. That moment was real. It happened. It belongs to you, completely and permanently, and nothing that came after can reach back and take it away. Now, what do you do with what's left? That is the question that actually matters. Not who was at fault, not the full inventory of what went wrong. What do you do now with everything that remains? I spent months asking the wrong question, months in circles, asking where I had failed, as if the end of the relationship were a verdict on my entire person, as if I were required to carry that verdict forward as settled truth. I went around and around. The question was a closed room. I could not find a way out because I was asking the wrong thing entirely. The right question was, what did this show me about myself that I couldn't have seen any other way? I know how that sounds. I know it can read like something that floats easily through the air and lands without weight. I mean it concretely. A broken mirror still reflects light. Sometimes from angles the whole mirror never showed. That relationship showed me things about myself that years of quiet, undisturbed living would never have surfaced. Where I still look for approval before I trust my own perception. What I confuse with tenderness. The exact point where I begin to make myself smaller to fit a space that was never shaped for me, and how smoothly I do it without noticing. And this, above everything else, this still astonishes me, how much I am still capable of feeling, deeply, completely, without any safety net underneath, at 82. That surprised me more than anything else. I am not certain the pain was worth the price. I want to be honest about that. I genuinely don't know. What I am certain of is this. What remained after it was over belongs entirely to me. What I learned, what I uncovered about myself that had been buried under decades of being someone's wife and someone's mother, all of that is mine. Nothing that follows can reach back and undo it. Now I want to say what I would say to any woman standing at the beginning of something new, sitting with a feeling she doesn't know what to do with, carrying a hope that arrived late and unexpected and makes her feel slightly ridiculous and completely alive. I am not going to tell you not to begin. That would be the most dishonest thing I could say. The heart does not take that instruction, and anyone who needs to be told not to begin is already in the middle of it. What I will say is this. Begin knowing what you are bringing to the door. The heart is allowed to be offered. That is its nature and its right. But your sense of yourself, the one you have built slowly, over more years than you can easily count, the particular way you know your own mind, the things you have learned about what you will and will not accept, the interior steadiness that no one handed you, but that you arrived at through your own long effort, those are not for offering. Those you examine carefully and honestly before you open the door. Because if you lose those inside a relationship, the loss does not end when the relationship ends. Perhaps you're thinking, I already know this. Perhaps. In theory, I knew it too. I could have nodded with complete confidence and told you exactly the right thing. And still I stood inside a situation where I barely recognized myself. Not because Bernard was a bad man, because I had not been prepared for what I had not yet discovered about myself. That is the distance between knowing and awareness. Knowing is information. Awareness is the moment that information finally makes its way from the mind into the actual living of a life. That journey is longer than we admit. You are not finished, not at 70, not at 85. I know that can sound like another demand. I mean it as the opposite, as freedom, as proof that something in you is still moving, that you can still be reached, that the story is not, in fact, closed. If you know a woman standing at the beginning of something, a feeling not yet named, a hope that hasn't shown what it really is, share this with her, not as a warning, as company, as I'm thinking of you, as I wish someone had sat beside me and said this before I began. I think of a woman at an open window late at night. She holds a cup of tea with both hands, feeling the warmth spread into her palms. She isn't waiting for anything to come through that window. She is simply there, present to the cold air and the warmth in her own hands, existing in the same moment. The window stays open, not because she is brave in any grand way, because she has learned over a long and real life that cold and warmth can live together, that the cup in her hands is hers, completely and securely, regardless of what the night may still bring. That is enough. That has always been enough. And if something in what I shared today settled somewhere in you, I'd be glad to hear it. Leave a word in the comments if you feel moved to. Not because I have answers, because I think women who have lived a long life understand each other better than we usually say.